Hi, welcome back to Kino Recaps. Today I'm going to explain a 2014 vigilante action film called The Equalizer. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The movie begins in Boston, Massachusetts at 7:30 a.m., sharp. In a simple tidy apartment, Robert McCall is getting ready for work. He's very meticulous. He times himself, 3 minutes and 22 seconds. He takes the train to work, a hardware store called Home Mart. He gets along with his customers, and his co-workers too. He meets his friend Ralph, for lunch, and asks him what he's packing. Tuna and salad sandwich, seems healthy. But he hears a crunching sound, and Ralph admits he added potato chips. Ralph's dream is to make security guard, and he has a test in 1 week and has to make weight. McCall says he agreed to help, but if Ralph doesn't apply himself, there's little point. They agree no more potato chips. After work, at home, he eats a simple meal and tidies up. He's really very meticulous. 5 minutes and 17 seconds. He might have a problem. At 1:40 a.m. he's still reading. He seems conflicted. He carefully folds a tea bag into a serviette, and heads to his local 24/7 diner. He sits at what is obviously his usual table, and positions everything just the way he likes it. He gets his tea and opens his book, The Old Man and the Sea. A young working girl, Alina, asks him if the old man has caught the fish yet, and they trade quips. McCall reminds her she is meant to have given up processed sugar. Turns out her dream is to be a singer. She pays her bill, says goodnight to Jake, and McCall, and leaves. The next day at work, in between moments, McCall looks preoccupied. A couple of young employees ask him what he did before working there. He tells them he was a pip, as in Gladys Knight and the Pips. He even does a little dance to convince them, much to the delight of his co-workers. Later that night, it's 2 a.m. and McCall is at the diner with a new book. Alina comes in, complaining of a rough night. They strike up a conversation about the old man and the sea. McCall explains one of the themes of the book is that people have to be true to their nature, no matter what. Alina gets a call. She has a difficult client waiting outside. She doesn't want to go with him, but in the end has no choice. McCall is concerned. The next day McCall is giving Ralph a personal training session. Ralph has a moment of weakness, but McCall gives him a pep talk, and he digs deep. That night at the diner, Alina is a little worse for wear. She moves to sit with McCall, which catches him off guard. She's embarrassed, but he insists she sit. They introduce themselves. McCall asks about her bruises, but she avoids the question and gives him her demo CD. She's embarrassed about her work, but McCall says she can be anything she wants to be, and tells her to change her life. Alina notices no ring on McCall's finger. She can see in his eyes that he is lost, and understands he is a widower. She asks about his reading and he explains it's something his wife used to do. He hopes it'll give them something to talk about when they see each other again. Later Alina walks McCall home. As they're saying goodnight, a car pulls up. Turns out Alina fought back against her difficult client and her pimp, Slavy, is not happy. McCall steps forward, but stops when he sees Slavy's minder has a gun. The next day McCall waits for Alina at the diner, but she doesn't show. The following night, Jake tells him she's at the ICU after getting beaten up. McCall goes to see her. She's banged up pretty bad. As McCall keeps vigil, Alina's friend Mandy comes to get coffee and he asks after Alina. Mandy is instantly wary, but McCall assures her he's a friend. Mandy explains that Slavy made an example of Alina, and that next time he would cut her throat. Later that night McCall thinks about Alina, and struggles within himself. This continues for a number of days, as he remembers their conversations. Cut to downtown Boston, where Slavy is pulling up at his club. He goes inside, does a shot, and goes upstairs to meet his team. He enters, takes care of some business, and fixes himself a drink. Just then McCall knocks and enters, closing the door behind him. Slavy and the team are surprised to see him. He approaches Slavy's desk, and says he's there about a girl. Slavy makes fun of him, but he presses on. Things start to get tense and Slavy's men position themselves. McCall offers Slavy $9,800 in cash for Alina's freedom. Slavy is insulted, but after a tense moment laughs it off. He pretends to accept the deal, and then says $9,800 will buy McCall 1 month. McCall makes a decision, takes his money back, and turns to leave. When he reaches the door, he locks it. He turns, and in seconds, assesses Slavy and his men, their weapons, and various objects in the room. 16 seconds he decides, starts his stopwatch, and steps forward. A gunman comes from behind, but he grabs his gun arm, Kimuras him, and uses his gun to shoot Slavy in the neck. The gunman grabs the pistol, as McCall grabs a shot glass and slams it into his eye. A second baddie lunges with a knife, which he takes and plunges into his sternum. He blocks a third baddie, slits his throat with the knife, and slams his head into a coffee table. The second baddie comes at him, but he blocks and stabs him again, and finally in the neck. Slavy's minder grabs a bottle, while McCall grabs 2 corkscrews. The minder smashes the bottle and swings, but McCall captures the arm and stabs it, and then his stomach. He pauses and watches the minder intently. He blocks a left, stabs him 2 more times and pauses again. Finally he stabs him under the chin, lets him fall, and stops his stopwatch. 28 seconds, He subtracts 9 seconds of pause time, leaving 19 seconds. He decides that's not too bad, and surveys his work. He goes to sit with Slavy and tells him he'll be dead in 30 seconds, while Alina's life will go on. Back home he cleans himself up, and sleeps like a baby. The following evening a serious Russian baddie, Teddy, arrives in Boston. He is met by Boston cops, and goes straight to the crime scene. He studies photos in Slavy's office, and replays the scene in his mind. The next day at work, McCall asks why Ralph is absent, and is told he quit with no notice. After work he pays him a visit, at his mom's restaurant. Ralph says there was an accidental fire, so he quit Home Mart to help his mom. McCall surveys the damage, and understands what really happened. Ralph introduces McCall to his mom, Maya, and he stays to help clean up. Meanwhile Teddy and Masters pay the Irish mafia a visit. In the meeting it's clear Little John doesn't know anything, but Teddy is not happy with the lack of information and protection from the Irish, given the money they pay them. Things escalate quickly and Masters is forced to shoot the 2 Irish minders. Teddy beats John senseless, while Masters keeps watch. Outside Masters freaks out. Teddy explains he's sending a message. That evening Teddy questions Mandy over Slavy's behavior before he was killed, and about Alina, who is missing. Mandy says she doesn't know anything and she doesn't know Alina very well. Teddy is not convinced. Across town at Maya's, 2 corrupt cops close the restaurant and kick the last customers out. They demand their protection money from Maya, she pays up and they leave. Outside, McCall surprises them, but they try to blow him off. He shows them a video he took of them extorting money from a local business. They force him up against the wall and pull a gun on him. When they threaten to kill him, McCall takes care of both of them. He orders them to return all the money they took and never extort money again, or his recording will become public. The next day they return the money, and Maya is overjoyed. The following day, McCall is happy to see Ralph back at work. Meanwhile, Teddy is visiting Mandy at home. He says the other girls told him she is close to Alina. When pressured, she tells him a black man was at the hospital, but she doesn't know his name. She's adamant she doesn't know where Alina is now, so he calmly chokes her dead, and leaves. The following day, Ralph turns up at the company softball game, wearing his new security guard uniform. McCall is happy for him and congratulates him, and the rest of the team do the same. Across town, Teddy has identified McCall on security camera footage. Next day at work, McCall approaches a colleague Jenny, at her register, and sees she's being held up by a thief with a gun. Jenny is paralyzed with fear, so he empties the register, and hands over the money. The thief demands her ring, but she says it was her mother's. McCall sees kids behind the thief, so he calmly takes Jenny's ring and hands it over. He follows the thief into the parking lot and clocks his registration number. A short time later he goes directly to tools, and grabs a sledgehammer. That evening Teddy identifies McCall getting onto a local bus. The next morning at work, Jenny goes to her register, and is amazed to find her mother's ring. Meanwhile McCall wipes down the sledgehammer, and puts it back on the shelf. That evening, while preparing to head down to the diner, McCall senses movement in the stairwell. He pauses at his front door, grabs his keys, starts his stopwatch, and opens the door. Teddy reaches his floor and introduces himself as a cop, looking into the homicides at Slavy's club. Teddy asks some questions about that night. Both men realize who the other is. Teddy shows McCall a picture of Mandy, and tells him she slipped and broke her neck. After a tense exchange Teddy leaves. McCall stops his stopwatch, and rushes to his window to observe. The next day, McCall puts a fake script on a medicine bottle, and installs a bunch of hidden cameras in his apartment. Across town, Teddy's team are gathering information on McCall. Teddy decides he wants him alive. He wants to know who he is and who he's working for. That night, McCall is reading at the diner when a power worker walks in. When Jake goes out back, McCall asks the man if they're waiting for anyone else. Outside, Teddy and a team are observing from their car. The power worker pulls a gun and tells McCall they're going to the car. McCall starts his stopwatch and goes into fight mode. He hits the power worker with his book, knocks the gun out of his hand, and slams his head into the table. He breaks his neck, and sticks a knife into the socket, tripping power to the diner. Teddy orders his men to stay in the car. McCall walks out of the diner, snaps some photos of them, and veers off. The men jump out of their car and follow. McCall leads them through back alleys, knocks one of them out, and identifies him as a cop. The men regroup but McCall is gone. Shortly after, Teddy and his men climb McCall's stairwell and pick his front door lock. They enter his apartment and begin searching. McCall begins observing them via his cameras. Turns out, he's in an adjacent building, and is watching them with night vision goggles as well. They find his fake script for air sickness medicine, and an airplane ticket for Mexico on his computer. Teddy realizes that McCall is not planning on going anywhere, and that he must be watching them. He threatens Masters that he find him, or he'll bring people in that can. The next day, McCall is driving through beautiful countryside, past large estates. He pulls up at a large country house and is greeted warmly. He has dinner with Susan, a former colleague, and her husband Bill. After dinner he shows Susan a picture of Teddy, and says he needs to know who he is. She insists McCall tell her what's going on. The next day Bill and McCall play chess, and discuss McCall's fake funeral and his retirement from the agency. A helicopter approaches, lands on the lawn, and Susan gets out and waves goodbye. Later, Susan explains that Teddy works for Vladimir Pushkin, a major Russian crime figure, with operations in the US. She shows him pictures of 2 Boston cops, working for Teddy, that were found dead, and explains Masters is missing. The next morning Susan finds McCall on the back landing. She asks him why he helped Alina. He says sometimes you help out because you can. Susan tells him to go be who he is. Inside, Bill asks Susan if she was able to help. She explains he didn't come for help, he came for permission. Back in Boston, Masters is laying low. Teddy calls, but he doesn't answer. His car alarms, so he grabs his gun and goes downstairs to investigate. He gets into his garage, looks into his car and sees a hose. Behind him McCall slams his head into the car, throws him inside, and handcuffs him to the steering wheel. He locks the car, starts the engine and raises the window. When Masters starts to choke, he lowers the window and asks him about Pushkin. Masters tells him where to go, so McCall raises the window and says he'll leave him there to think about it. Shortly after, Masters takes McCall to one of Pushkin's operations. The place is full of armed guards, and mountains of cash. The pair are taken to Andre, and Masters tells him the location's been compromised and he has to move everything. Andre is suspicious and stares at them, and to ease the tension McCall asks him about his gun. Andre puts his gun to McCall's head, and he takes it, and points it at Andre. McCall calmly tells Andre to tell his men to put their guns down and lay on the floor. Shortly after, McCall is seeing the workers out of the building, and giving them a nice bonus. McCall tells Masters to call it in, and he does. McCall says he knows Masters must have an out, and asks where to find it. Masters loses it and says he's a dead man, but McCall calmly tells him to do the right thing. Shortly after, McCall accesses Masters' safety deposit box, where he finds a USB drive, and a passport. Back at the meat packing plant, Masters is being arrested. One of the cops takes a colleague inside and shows him a room full of cash, and the Russian guards, all tied up. That evening at dinner, a worried Teddy gets a call from Pushkin, that he rejects. McCall appears at his table, and takes a seat. He tells Teddy he can keep going, or Teddy can call Pushkin and tell him to shut down his US operations. Teddy says that's not much of an offer. McCall says he knows that Teddy was an orphan, and that his history of emotional abuse drives him to do terrible things. Teddy tells him he doesn't have any emotions, as they are a weakness. McCall offers Teddy a chance to do the right thing, gives him his number, and leaves. Back in his apartment, McCall checks Masters' USB drive and finds details of money transfers to US officials. He phones an FBI agent, and emails him the information. He identifies a cargo ship owned by Pushkin. Shortly after, McCall is at the docks, walking away from the cargo ship. He activates the charges he's laid and blows the ship sky high. Across town, Pushkin rips Teddy a new one, while his team prepare for war. Teddy decides to kidnap McCall's friends, to flush him out. Before long, Teddy calls McCall from the docks and tells him it's their lives or his. He gets a call from Ralph at the Home Mart, where staff have been taken hostage. McCall takes the bus to the docks, while Teddy tracks him via his phone. As McCall's bus approaches, Teddy's crew see it's empty, and Teddy orders his men to kill a hostage. Music starts to play in the Home Mart. One of Teddy's men grabs Ralph, and makes him take him to the source. The man turns off the music, but McCall surprises him, takes his gun, and kills him. Another of Teddy's men gets a radio call for help, and leaves the hostages. He finds Ralph and orders him to the floor. McCall sneaks up on him, and takes him out. McCall tells Ralph to get all the hostages out. Teddy and his men arrive at the Home Mart. When they're all in, McCall cuts the lights and closes the doors. He spreads something on the floor. One of Teddy's men steps in it, making a noise, and gets hanged by McCall's makeshift noose. Another man comes to investigate, and gets a pruning saw in the neck. In another aisle, 2 men approach a lit blowtorch, but see what looks like a tripwire. They back away, one of them into a drill bit. McCall bores him to death. McCall leads another of Teddy's men into a trap by making noises. The man shoots the mirrors, which draws Teddy. McCall seizes the opportunity to jump him. The 2 men tussle and McCall actually has his hands full. Eventually he gets the better of him and stabs him in the neck, but he's injured and can't move. As Teddy and his last man approach, Ralph appears and drags him to safety. Teddy's man spots them, and shoots Ralph in the leg. They take cover, and McCall tells Ralph to turn the power back on in 40 seconds, and they split up. As Ralph runs for the switchboard, Teddy spots him and follows. Teddy's man sees a trail of blood, and follows McCall into the lunchroom. When Ralph turns the power on, the guard sees the room is empty and the microwave on. It explodes, killing him and setting off the sprinkler system. As Teddy approaches Ralph's position, he raises his gun to defend himself, but hears another shot instead. Teddy turns, as McCall emerges from cover with a nail gun. Teddy struggles to lift his gun, and McCall shoots him again. He shoots Teddy a number of times as he struggles, and finally shoots him in the neck. McCall watches him pass, and walks out. Cut to Moscow 3 days later. Pushkin's expansive estate is heavily guarded. Pushkin is taking a shower, when the lights suddenly go out. McCall is sitting in a chair near the corner, and tells Pushkin he's come for the head of the snake. Pushkin asks McCall to name his price, but there is no answer. He crosses the bathroom in the dark, turns the light on and turns off the tap, but it's too late and the overflowing water contacts a live wire and electrocutes him. As McCall walks out, he leaves a host of dead bodies in his wake. A few days later, back in Boston, McCall is walking out of his local grocery store. Alina spots him and rushes across the street to say hi. She tells him she gets her stitches out in a week, and shows him a book that she's reading. She tells him she got a real job too. She says she was given $10,000 in cash, but McCall pretends not to know anything about it. She thanks him, gives him a kiss and they say their goodbyes. Later, McCall goes to the beach to think, and makes an important decision. That evening he's sitting in the diner, checking a post he made on a local chat board. Someone has requested help. He confirms he can help, and is satisfied. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. It really helps the channel out. For more videos, subscribe, and turn on notifications.